Harps are hands down my favorite instruments on the entire planet, and today I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know if you want to start learning it for yourself. Harps are incredible instruments, but they can be a bit intimidating if you've never played one yourself. So this video is going to be your one-stop shop to learn everything you need to know if you want to start learning the harp or if you just want to start learning about it. So let's get started. First, let's talk about what a harp is. So we've all seen a picture of a harp or seen one in person. We know what it looks like. It has a bunch of different strings that get longer going down the instrument and really tiny up at the top of the instrument. So each of those strings plays a different note. It's kind of like the keys on a piano. The harp is a non-transposing instrument, so it's technically tuned to C. It will play the note that it says it's going to play when you pluck it. Believe it or not all instruments are like that. So for example, the C string on a harp will play C when you pluck it. Shocking. Now there are three main types of harps. There's a pedal harp, a lever harp, and a lap harp. On pedal harps, which are the types of harps that are found in the orchestra, each string can play three different notes. It'll play the note that it is assigned, like the name C string will play a C, but it could also play a note a semitone above that or a semitone below that. So it could play a C sharp or a C flat, and all the rest of the strings do the same thing. Now the pedal harps are the big ones. Like I said, you'll see these in orchestras. They're really tall, they're really grandiose, and they have pedals at the base where your feet are, kind of like a piano with pedals, but they have a totally different function. The pedals on a pedal harp will change the key of the instrument. So if you move the C pedal on a pedal harp, it will make your C string play either sharp, flat, or natural. There are 7 pedals on a pedal harp, each of them for one of the notes in a scale, and you can make each of those strings play a semitone above, below, or right at where it's supposed to sound. Lever harps, they're a little bit smaller, but they look like a normal harp, and you play them the same way that you play a pedal harp. The only difference is that they're far less expensive, but we'll get to that. They don't have any pedals. You can't change the key of the instrument. You can't change what note a string plays with your feet. You have to manually flip a lever. So for that reason, they're not really found in orchestras, and they're not as big, so they can't produce as big of a sound, but they're great instruments too. And then finally, we have lap harps. Lap harps are small, compact, they sit in your lap and you play them. That's why they're called lap harps. You won't find these in an orchestra, and they won't really be a part of our discussion for the rest of this video because they're kind of a niche thing. Harps are incredibly old instruments. They are millennia old, and people have known about them, have been playing them for years and years and years. Famously, King David in the Bible is known to have played a harp, and that tradition has kept on going. People have kept playing harps since way back when. Harps are technically members of the string family, but they are way different from any other string. The only instrument that kind of resembles a harp is a piano, and pianos aren't really found in orchestras very frequently. So harps are definitely the most unique instrument in the orchestra. So let's talk about how much a harp costs. You can expect to spend about as much on a harp as you would on a car, depending on how good of a car you want. It's the same with the harp. So you can find a relatively cheap lever harp that can play well for you for a couple $1,000s. If you want your lever harp to be a little bit more professional, it'll run you a couple more $1,000s, but we're still staying in about the lower than $10,000 range, even for the most expensive lever harps. Most of them are $5,000, and if you're a beginner, you can get one that is less than $5,000 that is completely adequate and suitable. $4,000, $3,000. If you go below that, you won't really find many that are in that price range that are good. Moving on to pedal harps, though. Pedal harps are going to run you tens of thousands of dollars. The least expensive pedal harps are $15,000, and they can run you up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, people will plate their pedal harps with gold leaf and ornament them and make them so intricate. So you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a pedal harp, but if you're just going for a pedal harp that is adequate and also you can use to perform, for example, that's going to be tens of thousands of dollars. So as you can probably tell, a lot of people don't just start off right off the bat with a pedal harp. That's pretty expensive. Many beginners will get a less expensive lever harp, $3,000, $4,000, and it's good because you basically play the lever harp the same way that you play the pedal harp. The only thing you have to learn new when you play the pedal harp is the pedals. But other than that, the lever harp is going to be pretty much the exact same motions. Pedal harps are going to be bigger and longer, so they will have more strings down in the lower end, for example, so you could get more bass out of a pedal harp. But other than that, you're going to be basically coming up with the same technique to play a lever harp and a pedal harp. Now let's talk about harp maintenance. Harps don't really move. You don't necessarily take them from where they are all that often because it requires a lot of infrastructure, so to speak. You typically need a dolly to wheel it around, and it depends on the type of harp that you have, but especially for pedal harps, you need some sort of dolly to wheel it around because it's very heavy. It's also very expensive, as we talked about, so you do not want to drop it. You have to get a hard case, not a soft case. That's not going to be useful when you're transporting it. A hard case is necessary for transportation, and it's just very difficult to move around. Large instrument, very heavy. So it will typically stay in one place. What you need to do to maintain a harp, whether it's a lever harp or a pedal harp that you have at home, you need to make sure that it gets cleaned regularly, remove the dust. You can have a soft case that you put over the instrument to keep the dust off of it when you're not playing, but make sure that you keep it clean. You also don't want the temperature of the room where the harp is to fluctuate that much, because what you'll end up doing is you'll end up having fatigue strains on your instrument. So when you make something warmer, that material is going to expand. The wood, the strings, all of those intricate parts of a harp, they're going to expand when it gets warmer and contract when it gets colder. And if you do that enough times, it can really start to wear on your instrument and it can cause it to break. All in all, it's a very sturdy instrument. It's not going to fall apart with a little breeze blowing over it, but it does have some weak places, like the soundboard is kind of a thin wood, so if you knock on that pretty hard, it has the potential to crack, and it could easily topple over. It's kind of a top-heavy instrument. If it topples over and something cracks or the soundboard breaks, that's basically game over. It needs to be professionally repaired, or you just need to go buy a new one. Cracking a soundboard makes it so that it never sounds the same after that. But minor repairs can be done on your own. Something like restringing the instrument if one of the strings breaks. That could be done by just somebody who owns the harp, or tuning the instrument. You could do that on your own as well. Before I move on, I would like to ask if you found this video informative or worth your time, that you leave it a like. I plan on making videos like this for all of the instruments in the orchestra, and I also am documenting my journey as I learn all of these instruments. So if that's something you want to be kept up to date on, please consider subscribing. Now let's talk about the type of music that you can play with a harp. Harps play the most gorgeous melodies and backgrounds, chords, and flourishes in orchestral pieces. They're absolutely stunning. You can play a lot of different types of music with a harp, but in the orchestra, you'll mainly have kind of a featured role. There aren't many solo harp parts in orchestral writing, but harps are very commonly either accompaniment or they will add flourishes, arpeggios, or glissandos to make the sound or whatever is happening in that moment of the piece just a little bit more emphatic. Some great examples are Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov, where the harp plays beautiful chords, add this wonderful texture to the cadenzas that the violin, the solo violin, plays. And another very famous example is from Swan Lake. The very famous oboe solo is played on top of a beautiful harp, playing arpeggios and glissandos and giving this very beautiful, mysterious vibe to the music. Outside of the orchestra, the harp can play a wide variety of songs. It is very similar to a piano in the sense that what you can do on a piano, you can basically do on the harp. They're not a one-to-one comparison, and the piano is a little bit more versatile, but there are very similar aspects to each instrument. And if you like to play your own music on the piano or accompany people on the piano, you could do that just as well on a harp. When it comes to the music that the harp plays, the harp does have a very wide variety of music and implementations, but it also has a great variety of sounds and textures, colors, and dynamic variation. You won't be the loudest instrument, which is why it's typically relegated to being kind of an accompaniment or a backup or a duet instrument, but you will have a beautiful soft sound and a very powerful loud sound. It won't overpower any of the other instruments, but you can get a nice dynamic variety. Some of your opportunities with the harp include obviously playing in an orchestra, but you can also be a wedding harpist, for example. I had a harpist play at my wedding, and it was probably my favorite part of the reception, and you can kind of use it the way that you use a piano. to accompany other people while they sing, or yourself while you sing, or just to play beautiful pieces solo. The final consideration that I want to throw out there for people who want to own a harp is that the harp is huge. Even if you get a lever harp, it is one of the bigger instruments, and you have to have somewhere to store it. You got to have an adequate place in your house or in your apartment. It can't necessarily just be shoved in a closet. And if you're going to spend that much money on a beautiful harp, you might as well display it and keep it out permanently. So it's good to consider your storage space and how much space you can actually give to a harp. It's not just the space where it needs to stand, but you also have to have a chair or a bench behind it so that you can sit behind the harp. You have to tilt the harp back to play it. So make sure you have enough space if you're considering buying a harp for yourself. That wraps up my beginner instrument overview for the harp. If there's something you think that I missed that I should have talked about, or if there's a question you have, an experience you've had, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'd love to read those and respond to those if you have anything to say. Otherwise, have a great day, and thanks for watching.